Life in the 21st century is moving at a frantic pace. In the last 20 years, the world has experienced transformative technological advances. It has also witnessed conflicts, revolutions, and coups d'etat, which have forced nations to rethink their way of life. The timeline of the century is a journey through those events. The years between 2016 and 2018 will be remembered as the time that global politics underwent radical changes and activism took on exponential strength. On November the 24th, 2016, all eyes were on the Teatro Colón in Bogotá. Juan Manuel Santos, president of Colombia, and the guerrilla leaders from the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, signed a peace agreement. 52 years of war were about to end. During the first years of the 20th century in Colombia, there was violence resulting from the confrontation between the supporters of the liberal and conservative parties. By the end of the 1940s, violence between the two sides led to the assassination of the leader of the Liberal Party, Jorge Eliezer Gaitán. His death shocked the country and triggered even more violence. Groups of liberal peasants who had been displaced from their land by the armed conflicts decided to set up self-defense groups. By 1964, these groups became the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, initiating a war that would last more than 50 years. The confrontation between the Colombian state and the guerrilla group lasted for decades, until Juan Manuel Santos became president of Colombia and sought new means to end the confrontation. The first contacts with the guerrillas were kept secret until it was safe to publicly start ceasefire talks. The meetings were held in Cuba for 4 years. The process divided Colombian public opinion. The people were consulted through a plebiscite to approve the peace agreement. More than 13 million people participated in the vote, and the agreement was rejected by 50.22% of the voters. Among those who opposed the agreement with the guerrillas was former President Álvaro Uribe, who argued that the proposal should be revised, as it did not guarantee the nation's stability.
¿Por qué los colombianos tenemos que permitir que delincuentes de la mayor peligrosidad puedan aspirar a la presidencia de Colombia?
After weeks of renegotiation, the agreement was signed. According to figures from Colombia's National Center of Historical Memory, the 50-year conflict between the FARC and the Colombian state has resulted in at least 37,000 kidnappings, more than 80,000 disappearances, and about 260,000 deaths. Upon signing the peace agreement, the FARC abandoned their weapons, formed a political party, and began to participate in the debate of ideas that underpins a democracy. Juan Manuel Santos's role in ending the conflict earned him the 2016 Nobel Peace Prize.
The signature of the deal is simply the end of the conflict. Then the hard work starts.
The implementation of the peace accords signed in 2016 has been slow and suffered setbacks. Several guerrilla leaders have returned to arms, and violence is threatening Colombia once again. While Colombians were desperate to keep the word peace in their language, a new word had entered the dictionaries in Europe, and it was making the continent tremble.
So let's make next year the year of prosperity and growth. Let's get Brexit done, my friends, and get on with our project.
Brexit, a composite word, now in common usage, sums up the most significant blow to the European Union since its foundation. On June the 23rd, 2016, the British people were called to a referendum to express their will on an issue of great importance to the nation. The options were simple: to stay in the European Union or leave it. More than 33 million went to the polls. The result, simultaneously feared and expected by millions, happened.
The total number of votes cast in favour of leave was 17,410,742.
52% of the population decided to break with the legal, political, and economic ties of the European Union. The political cost of Brexit was felt immediately, and Prime Minister David Cameron resigned.
The British people have voted to leave the European Union, and their will must be respected. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
But the divorce process was just beginning. Theresa May replaced Cameron in 2016 and tried to negotiate a separation agreement. At stake were the future of previously signed trade agreements with Europe and the immigration status of hundreds of thousands of citizens living in Great Britain. Theresa May remained in the Prime Minister's office until 2019, when she resigned, unable to cope with the circumstances.
The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
May handed over the post of Prime Minister to Boris Johnson, a figure who backed the Brexit campaign from 2016. Johnson had the responsibility of carrying forward the decision the British people had made in 2016 and leading Britain to disassociate itself from the European Union. For the United Kingdom, leaving the Union has both negative and positive outcomes. It will lose its trading privileges and no longer be able to participate in decisions that affect millions of people on the continent. However, leaving will potentially enable it to recover a budget for domestic policies and strengthen its financial and legal autonomy. The real consequences of the decision taken by British citizens in 2016 will only become apparent in the years to come. In the meantime, Europe and the UK are getting used to a new political, social, and economic relationship. Other events that occurred in 2016. A failed coup d'etat was staged in Turkey. The Panama Papers came to light, revealing information about hidden companies and tax evasion by politicians, sportsmen, celebrities, and businessmen. The president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, was subject to a process of dismissal in the middle of her mandate. During this political crisis, the Rio Olympics were held. A plane carrying the Brazilian soccer team, Chapecoense, crashed in Colombia. Only 6 people survived out of a total of 77 passengers. In the US, a terrorist unleashed gunfire at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, killing 50 people. The Spanish-speaking world mourned the death of Mexican singer-songwriter Juan Gabriel, who sold 150 million records worldwide. Timeline of the century continues with the arrival of one of the most controversial politicians of recent times in the White House. Also, 2 earthquakes that struck on the same day, 32 years apart. Before the end of 2016, the White House was preparing to receive a new tenant. Most polls predicted him as the loser. But on November the 8th, 2016, Donald Trump surprised everyone by winning 304 electoral votes, enough to defeat Hillary Clinton in the US presidential election. One of the richest men in the United States, a hotel developer and real estate mogul with no experience in politics, was the new president of the world's most powerful nation. He took office on January the 20th, 2017. From that day on in Washington, everything began to change. Donald Trump ignites passion among his supporters and detractors alike. Some support him in everything he proposes. Others disagree with him, calling him an inexperienced, narcissistic, arrogant politician and a compulsive liar. His rise to power began in June 2015, when he surprised the world by announcing his pre-candidacy for the Republican Party. He won the primary elections and became a presidential candidate. His inflammatory speeches meant he was constantly at the center of controversy.
You know, I'm not even allowed, I think, to say she has blonde hair because they'll say it's sexist. You know, Hillary Clinton, he spoke harshly to a woman today. He therefore treats women badly. I mean, this woman is out of control.
During his campaign, Donald Trump faced accusations and scandals that linked him to allegations of sexual harassment and tax evasion. The origin of his fortune was questioned. In spite of all this, on January the 20th, the doors of the White House opened up for him. At the beginning of his mandate, he created controversy by attacking the Obamacare program, which was the signature healthcare reform law of his predecessor, Barack Obama. It aimed at protecting patients and helping the most vulnerable of the population receive the medical care they needed. Trump threatened to deport 11 million illegal immigrants and ban Muslims from entering the country. He informed the United States' southern neighbor, Mexico, that he was going to build a wall to stop illegal immigration, and also told them that they should pay for its construction.
We have to stop illegal immigration. It's very important. We need borders, and if you don't have borders, you don't have a country.
Working alongside Donald Trump seems to be no easy task. Several high-ranking officials have resigned from their posts or been fired. In 2020, he fired his security advisor, John Bolton. His confrontations with the press and his presence on social media are now a daily occurrence.
I'm not going to give you a question. You are fake news. Go ahead.
Despite his particular style of governing, in 4 years, Trump has made progress and reforms in the criminal justice system, created the Space Force, reformed the tax system, and defeated the caliphate that ISIL tried to establish in the territories of Iraq and Syria. In 2020, Donald Trump sought re-election for a second term and faced a difficult electoral context. New scandals, controversies, criticisms of his policies and decisions in geopolitics were abundant. In the United States, racial tension returned to the streets. And the crisis of the coronavirus pandemic made the road to re-election even more challenging. In Washington, the foundations of politics were shaking. Meanwhile, in Mexico, nature was stirring up tragic memories. In 2017, Mexico relived one of its worst nightmares. The 19th of September 1985 is etched in the memory of the Mexican people, as the country was hit by a colossal earthquake. On the very same day, 32 years later, they were hit by another strong earthquake. In 1985, Mexicans experienced the most destructive earthquake in their history. With a magnitude of 8.1, the epicenter was located off the coast of Guerrero and Michoacan. In 2017, they relived the tragedy with a 7.1 magnitude earthquake that originated on the border of Puebla and Morelos, 120 kilometers from Mexico City. The 1985 earthquake happened at 7:19 in the morning, severely affecting about 30,000 structures and another 68,000 with partial damage. It left thousands of fatalities. In 2017, Mexicans were participating in a drill conducted as part of the protocols established from the tragedy experienced 32 years earlier. Hours later, they felt an actual earthquake. No one, not even the most experienced scientists, could predict that on the same day, 32 years later, Mexico would shake. The big difference between the two tragedies was the preparation of the population, the advanced anti-seismic construction systems, and the modern warning systems that allowed the population to prepare for a possible earthquake. Although the movement caused less damage than in 1985, the city was not unscathed. The authorities coordinated a rescue effort, while thousands of civilians took to the streets to help remove debris. At least 44 buildings collapsed, and the official death toll was 369. In 2020, the warning systems and the capacity of citizens to react were again put to the test, when on June 23rd, an earthquake of magnitude 7.4 shook Oaxaca and Mexico City. There was some structural damage, and at least 6 fatalities were reported by authorities. Other events that caught the world's attention in 2017 were: the terrorist organization ETA announced the termination of its operations after more than 50 years of activity. In the United Kingdom, tragedy befell an Ariana Grande concert due to a terrorist attack. That same year, hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria hit the Caribbean and the United States. At age 39, Emmanuel Macron won the presidency of France, becoming the youngest president in the country's history. Back in timeline of the century, the disappearance of a submarine shocked Argentinian society, and we will relive the rescue of 12 young people who were trapped in a cave in Thailand. In the depths of the waters of the Atlantic, south of the South American continent, lie the answers to an unexplained accident. The ARA San Juan was one of two TR-1700 submarines acquired in the 1980s by the Argentine government. On November the 15th, 2017, after reporting a failure which had apparently previously been fixed, all contact with the submersible was lost.
Al no haber correspondido ninguno de los 54 contactos que han sido visualizados y no corresponder con Submarino San Juan, lamentablemente no podemos corroborar qué es lo que pasó.
The submarine's last known location was 240 nautical miles away, or 430 kilometers from the coast of the Gulf of San Jorge. It had 44 occupants in total. The next day, news leaked that the Argentinian Navy had ordered a search on the grounds that it was suspected to be lost. After 48 hours, the disappearance was confirmed.
No hemos podido localizar o detectar al submarino San Juan y de alguna manera son horas de mucha incertidumbre.
A document from the submersible's last communication showed that the crew reported seawater entering the ventilation system, which caused a short circuit and a fire that was under control. On November the 23rd, the Navy reported the detection of a single, short, violent, non-nuclear anomalous event. This was the implosion of the submarine, with a power equivalent to 5.7 tons of TNT. Its duration was 40 milliseconds, and it's presumed that the crew members died instantly. On November the 30th, the Argentine government ended the search without success. They reported the death of the crew members, arguing that they could not have survived the conditions of the event. Relatives of the crew chained themselves in front of the government house, asking for the search to be restarted. In August 2018, the American company Ocean Infinity was hired to restart the search. On November the 17th, 2018, 1 year after the disappearance, the ARA San Juan was found at a depth of more than 800 meters.
El Ministerio de Defensa y la Armada dieron un comunicado de prensa dando cuenta de que el Ship Constructor había avistado el submarino ARA San Juan.
The handling of the crisis was marred with accusations of irregularities, negligence, secrecy, and a lack of interest in the investigation. The real cause of the accident was never clarified. While this tragedy remained unresolved in the waters of the Atlantic, in Thailand, the desperation of 12 young people who were stranded in a cave came to an end. In Thailand, a bicycle ride turned into a terrifying rescue operation. On June 23, 2018, 12 members of the Wild Boars youth soccer team and their coach pedaled at full speed through the rice fields. They were on their way to Tam Luang, a cave complex in the Doi Nang Non mountain range in Thailand. It was not their first trip, but this visit would be very different to previous expeditions, as they became the protagonists in one of the most spectacular rescues in history. They entered the cave carrying only their flashlights. They didn't plan to stay more than an hour, but heavy rain took them by surprise. The cave was flooded, and they became trapped. With no alternative, they went inside until they found a safe place to stay, 4 kilometers from the entrance. Hours later, their bikes were found by a forest ranger who sounded the alarm. The rescue began. The rain made the operation difficult. Water pumps were installed to try and lower the volume of water entering the cave. Rescue workers and divers from different countries joined the operation. No contact could be established with the boys for 9 days, until British divers finally found them. Their relatives celebrated the fact that they were still alive. But how to get them out? 3 options were considered. Waiting for the water to drain naturally, which could take months. Teaching the teenage boys how to dive, or having them assisted out by professional divers. 6 days later, 18 cave diving specialists went searching for them. The rescue of the wild boars was an incredible feat, and the teenage boys became famous. The town of Tam Luang is now a tourist attraction. What could have ended in tragedy became a story of hope. A statue was erected at the site of the cave entrance in honor of Saman Kunan, a Thai diver who died in the operation. Other events that impacted the world during 2018. The so-called migrant caravan took place in Central America. It's estimated that thousands of people left the Honduran city of San Pedro Sula for the United States in mid-October. Eritrea and Ethiopia reached a peace agreement, putting an end to a war that lasted around 2 decades and caused the death of at least 80,000 people. In football, France won the World Cup, and Luka Modric won the Golden Ball, ending 10 years of victories between Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. At the 2018 Cannes Film Festival, actress Kate Blanchett and director Agnes Varda, accompanied by other actresses, read a manifesto against male violence in the industry in support of the Me Too movement. Comedian Bill Cosby was convicted of sexual abuse. Back in Timeline of the Century, we will learn how one teenager's ideas inspired millions around the world, and how the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I was commemorated. The steps leading up to the Parliament building in Sweden were the first to witness the ideas of a young woman seeking to save the future of millions around the world. How old does someone need to be to change the world? This question didn't cross Greta Thunberg's mind, and at age 15, she set out to do exactly that. It all started with a protest in front of the Swedish Parliament. In August 2018, Greta Thunberg decided to skip school and protest with a sign that read, "School Climate Strike." Months later, that solitary teenager was meeting with heads of state at the UN and with the Pope at the Vatican.
The climate and ecological crisis is a global crisis, so we need to stand together and support each other and to take action.
In September 2019, the young girl inspired nearly 4 million people around the world with a global protest. She became the symbol of a generation demanding change. Greta, born in Sweden, has Asperger's syndrome, which means she registers emotions in a very different way. For her, fighting for the climate has profound personal consequences. At an early age, she learned about the climate crisis. The impact of understanding what was happening on the planet and its environment changed her life forever. She started skipping school every Friday in protest to draw the attention of leaders to the commitments of the Paris Climate Agreement. The Fridays for Future movement was born, and little by little it gained momentum. What began with an individual girl on the steps of the Swedish Parliament inspired more than 35,000 children in Belgium, 250,000 in New York, and 100,000 in London. In Germany, 1.4 million people took to the streets. Such influence did not exempt her from the judgment of politicians with different views. While some criticized her harshly, others saw something special in her. Al Gore, former Vice President of the United States and environmental activist, commented, "She is an inspiration to me and to people all over the world." In many, her movement generated a change of attitude necessary to combat the challenges of a world hit by climate change.
Our house is on fire.
Finally, her voice and that of millions around the world is being heard, and the planet deserves it. One young girl's message inspired millions around the world, just like the memory of hundreds of thousands who gave their lives to end the First World War. November 2018 marked 100 years since the end of World War I, in which 32 nations were involved in a 5-year-long bloody conflict. The Great War broke out in 1914 and ended on November 11, 1918, with the signing of the Armistice of Compiègne in France. This war pitted the United Kingdom, Russia and France against a triple alliance between Italy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany. Both sides were joined by countries including the Ottoman Empire, Australia, the United States and China. From 2014 to 2018, commemorations for the centennial were hosted in different parts of the world. The European Union brought its presidents and prime ministers together. On April 6, 2017, the United States, a nation that was initially neutral, commemorated the centenary of when they officially entered the conflict. International press emphasized how the event was given a short shrift in Germany, as the country's Chancellor Angela Merkel urged the international community to recognize that Europe was still in the throes of territorial conflict due to Russia's action in Crimea. Instead of celebrating with fanfare, Russia chose only to inaugurate a monument of heroes from the war. A military ceremony was held in Paris on November 11, 2018, to commemorate the armistice signing 100 years before. 70 world leaders attended the event. During World War I, 9 million soldiers and around 6 million civilians were killed, and at least a further 6 million died due to famine. The United States' status as a great power was revealed during the war. Nationalism and socialism gained influence in Europe, and empires collapsed. US President Woodrow Wilson called it the war to end all wars. This wasn't to be the case. In 1939, a new global conflict erupted. Wounds left open by the First World War triggered a second. '18 also brought other events. In France, the Yellow Vests movement emerged against President Macron's tax policies. It was revealed that the British consulting firm Cambridge Analytica used data from more than 50 million Facebook users to interfere in political elections in several countries. In Europe, a corruption scandal caused Mariano Rajoy to leave the presidency of Spain. In Central America, Guatemala's Volcán de Fuego erupted, leaving 194 dead. Upon returning to Timeline of the Century, an unprecedented meeting between North Korea and the United States captured the world's attention. The Republic of Singapore in Asia was the scene of a meeting that surprised the world. For the first time in history, a sitting US president met with a North Korean leader. Decades of tension and conflict were on the discussion table. The North Korean nation had signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1985 and in 1994 agreed to denuclearization. In return, the United States would progressively lift the economic sanctions imposed years before. But in 2002, the US government revealed a North Korean atomic weapons program that violated the agreements. North Korea withdrew from the treaty in 2003, and 3 years later began testing missiles, which continued until 2017. That year, it made its most controversial ballistic test, and Donald Trump named Kim Jong-un the Little Rocket Man. International organizations put pressure on North Korea to negotiate with the United States to ease the tensions. Finally, on June 12, 2018, the two leaders sat down in Singapore to agree on the complete denuclearization of the North Korean peninsula and to work towards a stable peace between the two nations. Following this historic meeting, Trump said that he had developed a special bond with Kim Jong-un, who in turn assured him that the world would see a significant change.
I want to thank Chairman Kim for keeping his word, fulfilling a promise that he made to me.
In February 2019, they met for a second time in Vietnam. The US rejected the request to ease economic sanctions in exchange for a partial dismantling of its nuclear arsenal. On June 30th of the same year, at a third meeting in which they had agreed to resume negotiations, Trump did what no sitting US president had ever done before. He set foot on North Korean soil. The meetings were groundbreaking for both nations. However, the agreement was described as vague and without a calendar.
We have not been briefed at all on a strategy. Does the Trump administration really have a strategy to be able to achieve these objectives?
Denuclearization seems far away. The North Korean program has decades of investment and is a source of national pride. It's estimated that North Korea has between 20 and 60 atomic weapons, with at least one nuclear facility to produce them. In 2020, it fired at least 9 test missiles. 2018 was a year full of surprises in politics. Former Brazilian President Lula da Silva turned himself in after being accused of corruption, while Jair Bolsonaro won the presidential election. In Mexico, Manuel López Obrador also became president after 2 failed attempts. In the United States, the death of former President George Bush Sr. was announced. In tennis, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic were leaders of the ATP Tour. Mourning spread across the Marvel universe of comics and movies after the death of Stan Lee. Upon returning in Timeline of the Century, one of the most prodigious minds of the 20th century said goodbye to this dimension. In Timeline of the Century, humanity has witnessed the brilliance of individuals who have revolutionized our way of life. In 2018, the world said goodbye to one of them. Sat in a wheelchair and communicating through a computer, Stephen Hawking helped us understand the mysteries of the universe. His name will be forever associated with those of great scientists such as Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, and Galileo. He entered Oxford University at the age of 17, where he specialized in physics, and later obtained his PhD from Cambridge University. At the age of 21, he was diagnosed with an incurable disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. His doctors gave him only a few years to live. He would defy doctors, as he would continue to defy the scientific community, and lived another 55 years. In his long career, Stephen Hawking helped scientists understand the mysteries of black holes and their relation to the creation of the universe. Alongside his many contributions to society, he also warned of the dangers of artificial intelligence. His personality transcended the scientific world, and he became an important disseminator of knowledge. Known for his black humor, Hawking also had the ability to make people laugh.
There's nothing like the thrill when you discover something no one knew before. It is like sex, but it lasts longer.
He married twice and had 3 children. He died at home at the age of 76 as a result of the illness that had affected him for more than 5 decades. Hawking was the first to propose a theory of cosmology that united relativity and quantum mechanics. He will always be remembered for captivating the world and making the unintelligible accessible for everyone. These were part of the events, situations, and characters that wrote the history of these last 20 years. The history of figures who left their mark on politics and science. The story of societies and countries that found peace and expressed their desire for change. Tragedies that inspired unity and awakened hope. A past that was written daily, feeding part of the timeline of the century.